Hi, I'm Mike. Welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to change out the front wheel bearing on the Triumph Spitfire. I hope you find it helpful. Hey, if you get the opportunity, check out the information at the end of the video. I've taken some information out of the Triumph workshop manuals for a couple different generations, specifically on how to change out the wheel bearings. And you'll see that there is some differences between the generations of workshop manuals. So again, check that out and hopefully you'll find that helpful as well. Hope you enjoy this video, and if you do, please subscribe. The reason why I'm looking at the wheel bearing is that when I'm driving down the road, this driver's side tire has a bounce to it, and it's a visible shake on this side and only on this side. I've had the wheels balanced. Professionally, I've changed the tires around to different positions on the car to make sure it isn't an issue with the tread or anything like that on an individual tire. So my next step is to just change out the wheel bearing. But in any case, if you're getting that kind of symptom, or if you're getting some sort of wobble in the steering wheel, one way to try to narrow it down is to take both the top and the bottom of the wheel and move it. And if you're getting any movement or feeling any movement, it is possible your wheel bearing is going either top to bottom or side to side. And in both cases, I've got a minimum amount, not enough to probably indicate it's a wheel bearing, but just to be safe, I'll go through that. And if that doesn't eliminate the problem, I'll take it to the next step. Next, remove the two bolts that are holding on the brake caliper. You need a 5/8 inch wrench to do that. When you're done taking the caliper off, lay it on top of the A-arm and put your bolts where you can find them. Don't lose them. Next thing you do is you take a screw, put it in the end of the dust cap, and turn it in until the dust cap is loose, and then pull it off. The next step is to remove the nut, and to do that, you have to take off, you got to remove the cotter pin out of here. Basically bend the legs back and pull it out with a combination of maybe a nail that you stick through the hoop here, or a pair of pliers, but pull that out. You're going to throw that away anyway, so don't worry about damaging that. Well, if it doesn't come easily with a pair of needle nose pliers, you can always resort to the good old vice grips. Once you've got the cotter pin out, use a 13/16 socket to remove the nut, the castellated nut. It shouldn't have been that tight. Maybe that's part of my problem. I'll stick that into some mineral spirits and clean it off. And then you just pull. Gosh darn it. This should come right off. All right, it didn't come out easily without actually prying the washer just slightly. You don't have to really yank on it, just enough to get the washer to move, and then pull the whole thing. And what you get out of the front side, the old bearing will come right out, and the whole assembly for the hub comes out, and you've got the seal on the back, that's going to be replaced, and you've got on the inside, you got the inside bearing as well. So I'll disassemble that on the bench. Additionally, looking at the spindle, on the spindle here, we've got, you can see it's greased. It looks like, yeah, I think that's probably okay. I'll look at that a little bit closer when I get it cleaned up. But I'll clean up the spindle and make sure that I don't have any galling on that surface. Here's the spindle cleaned up. It doesn't look too bad. I've got a little bit of grease here on the oil catcher to clean up here as well. But what I'll do before full assembly, I'll take the inner bearing race and just fit that over there and spin it a little bit to see if it's okay. I also want to take a little bit more look at the threads on the spindle to make sure that there's enough there. I have a feeling I may have some damaged threads on the nut, so I'm going to look at that as well, just to make sure things are won't fall apart or come apart going down the road. All right, I'm at the messy part of my workbench. This is where all the greasy crap happens. In order to get the seal off, it's pretty easy. Just put a screwdriver underneath it and pull it off. The original backing that came with the seal needs to be pried out. So just use a good old-fashioned screwdriver and twist it, and it'll come right out. Next, you just remove the old bearing. We're not going to reuse that. So there's the bearing, nicely greased. So the lack of grease wasn't a problem on this one. Then we've got some bearing races. So the bearing races, there's one on each side. This is the back side of the rotor. And what we'll end up doing is basically taking an old, either a drift or some sort of chisel or an old screwdriver, and go from the opposite end to get the outer bearing race knocked out. And on this side, we'll flip it around and use that same technique to drive out the bearing race on the back side or the inner bearing. You're going to want to save those races because they're really helpful to use as drivers to push them or press fit them back into the rotor itself. So, or into the hub. So don't, actually on the inner side it is the rotor, and on the outer side it's the hub. So don't damage those too much because you're going to reuse them again. It's actually kind of hard to see until you get all the grease out of the inside of the hub, but there are two areas, they're 180 degrees apart. That one is, you can't see because of the light. But right here, I'm going to put the drift in here, or actually it's a little chisel, but right there is, and the one on 180 degrees across from it is where you'll pound out the races. Same thing on the inner race. I'll flip that over. So you don't damage your bolts here. It's a good idea to use 2x4s. I'm one-handed here, so give me a second. Use 2x4s to protect those threads, so you don't damage them or bend over the bolts while you're hammering out the races. All right, I got the outer race out. Now it's time for the inner race, and just in case people want to comment positively, I've actually got a ball peen hammer for this job. I got criticized on one of my earlier videos for not using a ball peen hammer. I was using a claw hammer, and somebody thought that was just awful. So a setup, basically using this, I probably should be using a drift and not a chisel, but okay. So next video I'll make an improvement. Again, I'm using 2x4s to protect the rotor this time, not the hub. So basically just drive it out Both sides. That's it. All it takes. You don't have to tap very hard, and just enough to get it out. All right, here's the parts. So they're all cleaned up. A little bit of inspection on this. This is the washer that goes on the outer side that basically holds the bearing against the spindle. This has got a little bit of a burr on it. There's a flat edge here, as you can see, and looks like some moron, probably named Mike, damaged this over here as well. So I'll take a file to it, knock down the burrs. Burrs are never good when it comes to flat surfaces, so I'll take care of that. I'm looking at the old nut. I'm a little concerned about the crowns of the threads, that they may be worn out a little bit. I have purchased a new nut just in case that was the case. So I'll be replacing that. Here's the old inner bearing race. There's no galling. That looks like it's in pretty good shape. It probably didn't need to come out, but hey, you don't know that until you get it cleaned up. And anyways, that gives me some confidence that the bearings weren't failing. And this is the outer bearing race. And again, that looks pretty good. Let me see if I can get better. Again, not a whole lot of chatter or anything on it, so that looks pretty good as well. In any case, whenever I change out roller bearings, I always change the races out as well. So I bought a kit that includes both inner and outer bearings, the cotter pins, and the inner seal from I think it was British Parts Northwest, and there's the part number for that kit. And I also bought a castellated nut, again, also from British Parts Northwest, and there is the part number for that as well. Also, before assembling everything, I will use a degreaser to get all of the grease off of the surfaces, so that I'm starting with something clean, and I don't have problems with grease on my rotor surface to contaminate my brakes. Before installing the races on both sides of the spindle, on the hub side and on the rotor side, you want to make sure that the bottom surface that the race is going to sit on doesn't contain any burrs or sharp edges that would cause the bearing not to sit flush, basically touching 100% all the way around. And make sure you're looking in the corners, although the races do have a curvature to them, but look in the corners as well. Make sure there's nothing that's on both sides. And before we install the races, which I'm going to do on a press, I'm going to provide some new grease around the hub and the rotor surfaces, so that the new races won't gall going in, and they'll go a little bit more smoothly than if you did it on a dry metal-to-metal surface. All right, now I've got my setup for driving in the race using a shop press. And what I've done so far is I took the race and I put a little bit of grease on the outside. I'm using Lucas Oil Red and Tacky number 2, which is used for wheel bearings. So now I'm taking the old outer race. I'm taking the face-to-face, I'm putting it down this way, and then so it's inverted for the other one, and so it's basically knife edge to knife edge. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a piece of wood. This one's too wide, so I'll find something a little bit thinner, and then I will use that, or actually not as wide. I'll use that to drive it down. It should not take much force. I just want to make sure that it's nice and straight as it's going in. All right, I've got it supported now, lined up good enough. So I'm just gonna drive it in slowly. Okay, that should be it. Now, there's an alternate method of doing this than using a hydraulic press. You could also use a ball peen hammer and basically just take the old race, do the same thing I did here, and tap it in to make it go down all the way. Now I'm gonna do a close up here, and you see that race is all the way in, and it's seated at the surface there. So that's all you're trying to accomplish, is getting it to sit on the bottom. So same deal with the inner bearing race. This time flip it over, and again use the blocks of wood to protect the threads or protect the bolts for the wheel. Get this set up and use the good old Lucas Oil Red and Tacky, and just spread it around on the inside here on this surface, so you got something to prevent a little bit of galling as it's going in here. It just has to be a thin layer. Okay, now we'll set up the new bearing. Drop that in. It'll go down a ways on its own. Now look at that. It went down almost all the way, if not all the way. Okay. And then we take the old bearing and a block of wood and just drive it down. Just to make sure it's bottoming out. Yeah, it's going down. Sorry, there. Now you can see it. It's going down a little bit. That's good. At this point, it's the press is pressing on the wood. So I think it dropped in pretty good right from the start. So no issue with that. All right, so I used a flat file. Maybe not the prettiest workmanship, but important part is the burr that was, or the raised area is gone here. It's nice and flat across the surface. You can see that there are some indentations, but those are below the surface, so there's nothing sticking up or protruding. Same thing on the back side. So that, again, that burr is gone, as you can see on both sides there. So it should sit flat. There shouldn't be any issues at all. It's nice and flat to the touch. It's not a sealing surface, so I'm not worried about the scratches and maybe some of the indentations here. But certainly better than it was. Okay, so the next step is to get the grease inside of the roller bearing. And I'm going to use a manual method. What I'll be doing is basically driving the grease in through the bearing with these types of nipping or swiping motions. And the intent is to drive the grease into the bearing, and then so that it's on the inside here. And we'll be able to visually see it. The amount of grease I have in my hand probably is about enough, maybe a little bit more than what's needed, but And it's a messy process. If you don't like getting your hands dirty, then find a different way. But this works. So I basically just drive it through like this, and you look on the other side, and of course there's not enough there, so we're going to go around several times. But basically drive it through, nip it in. We're not forcing it through the back, we're forcing it through the wheels. Okay, I've gone one rotation now. Okay, let's look in the back. It's starting to come through. I need a little bit more grease on this. All right, let me get it off my thumb. There we go. Again, this is Lucas Oil Red and Tacky #2 grease. All right, let's look at the back. Okay, now you can start seeing it's starting to come through. There's a few bearings that haven't gotten all the way through yet, so I'm going to keep going. I'm going to get it off my thumb again. There we go. All right, let's look. So now we're looking at the back of the bearing, and you can see the grease has gone through. So there's enough in there. And then I'm going to set it aside. I'm putting it on a piece of the plastic wrapping that the thing came in. So there it is, and we'll get it cleaned up a little bit before we put it in the car. The Triumph workshop manual says to put grease inside of the cavity between the outer bearing and the inner bearing, and to fill that cavity. I think it's primarily to keep water out of the bearings and just displace the water if you ever get that kind of situation. So I'm going to fill it up. I'm sure it's not going to all stay in there when I put the hub and the rotor back on the car, but it should help solve that problem of getting keeping water out. So again. So I'm going from the back side of the hub. You can see I've already got some grease put into here. I'm just using a grease gun and pushing the grease into the cavity. Keeps my hands a little bit clean. The other thing that the workshop manual said you needed to do is take the inner bearing seal and soak it in oil. So that's been done. Before I take it out, what I'm going to do is put the inner bearing into the hub. If I can get it off my fingers, there we go. All right, the grease has been put in on the end, and you can see you don't see any of the bearings at this point. It's all in there. Now I'm going to install the oil or the grease seal. I'm going to wipe off the oil on the metal part of the seal. You can see it's kind of dripping with oil right now. I'm going to wipe that off, and then it gets installed metal side down because the felt side is going to be sitting in the cup on the back of the well, you'll see it. I'll point it out. I can't remember the name of the darn thing. To get it to seat fully, what I ended up doing is I took the felt part off. I know it's kind of glued in there, but I took the felt part off and then used a block of wood to basically use that as the intermediary between the good old ball peen hammer, and basically just drove it down in, as you can see. Now I'm going to take the seal out of the oil and basically just push it back in. Make sure it's seated in there. Okay, I had to degrease, as you can see, the oil that squeezed out of the seal. Probably should have squeezed the oil out of the seal a little bit beforehand. I think everything else is okay. And you can see where that seal, that cup, the seal is going to fit inside of that. So basically at this point, I just install like this, and we're going to get it so it's fitting in. Let's see if I can get that picture there. There you go. There's the seal fitting inside the cup, and we just push it in. So that's on. And the next thing I'll do is go get the outer bearing, put that in, and then we'll and the washer, and then we'll start making. Okay, so there's the outer bearing, and I'll put the tapered side in. It goes in here like this. Sorry, this is not easy doing one-handed. All right, so that's in there, and then I take the washer, and where the flat is going on the flat here. All right, then that's on, so you can see that. And it's going to move just a little bit, and then we take the new castle nut and turn that on first by hand, and then tighten it down to at least set the bearing to begin with. Okay, so I'll put that on like that. And off camera, let me grab my wrench, and then I'll do the initial preset. All right, so I've got my 13/16 socket, and what we're doing now is basically just tightening this up just to drive it in lightly. We're not trying to do any preset or anything, just make sure that everything goes, it's seated fully on the spindle. Part of the pushing in is the felt seal in the back that will need to be compressed. Let's see how we're doing. So the castle's getting closer, so we should be bottoming out in a little bit. Okay, I've bottomed out. I don't need to set it any tighter than that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is back this off, because right now this won't spin. It is tight. So I'm going to back it off now until it's freely rotating, and then tighten it down until it doesn't rotate, and then back it off a little bit. Okay, now it's freely rotating. A little bit of, so I'm going to back it off just a little bit more. And you can see the oil on the floor here. That came out of the seal. So back it off just a little bit more. Okay, that's rotating a little bit easier. That's nice. All right. Now, what I'm going to do and how am I going to do this is I'm going to tighten this up again until it does not, or it's to the end of being freely rotating. And then what I will do is back it off, back the nut off. Again, this is a fine tooth thread here, so I'm going to back this off until the next castle opening is sitting on top of the flat here, or the flat here, so that I can put in the cotter pin. All right, it's freely rotating. All right, that's got a little bit. That's pretty tight. Okay, so now I'm going to back this off one nut right here, or one, basically a 1/6 of a turn here. Okay. That may be a little too much still. I'm going to take it another 1/6. There we go. That seems to be about right. Okay, now I'll grab the cotter pin. And I got 2 different cotter pins, and one is really long, and I think that's too big for this. So I'm taking the smaller one of the 2. There were 2 in the kit. And basically find that hole, put it in. That seems to be about right. And then bend the pin. That's the first one. That's the second one. And then we get the grease cap and put the grease cap back in. And I got to take the old screw out of the grease cap. And this grease cap is in good condition, so all we'll end up doing is putting it in and then tapping it in. Get it tapped in here. And I'll get my trusty light duty ball peen hammer and just tap it in. Want to dent that, and that's it. So that's been replaced. Next thing I do is I got to test for run out, make sure that there's no more than 2 thou run out. In order to do that, I've got to put the brake caliper back on. So again, I got some opportunity to degrease, as you can see, the rotor. So I'm going to do that again off camera. I'll install the caliper off camera, and then I'll show you how I'm doing the run out measurement. All right, here's the test setup. I've got a dial indicator perpendicular to the rotor, and it's hanging off of or connected to the caliper. I had to take the brake pads off because didn't want to squeeze the pistons in. So I took the brake pads off so that I can turn this. And what I'm seeing as I'm spinning, I've got about a 5/1000 variation. Maybe a little bit more than 5/1000. Maybe about 6 or 7. So that's too much. So that tells me that the rotor may be a little bit too loose or at an angle a little bit. So what I'm going to do is tighten it up again a little bit more and see if that makes a difference. So I'm going to tighten it up. I'm going to go in 1/4 increments, or sorry, 1/4 turn increments to see if that helps. So let's see, get this set the right way. So from the bottom to the 1/4 here, so 1/4 turn. All right, let's see if that had any impact. Well, it certainly set it a little bit more relative to the brake caliper. Yeah, that's better. So I need to tighten it just a little bit more. And I'm going to do an 1/8 turn this time. So basically 1/6. So one flat. And that may be a little too tight, but let's see what the measurement does for us here. So man, it's still, that's not right. And I got the, let's see, this should be the low setting in between here, and that's showing, yep. So we'll call that 74, and then this should be, or 73, and this should be the high setting. Yep, and that is 78. So it's got a 4 thou. Okay, I'm going to tighten this down and then back it off, and we'll see what that does. Okay, now that's hand tight. Now I'm going to back it off because that won't turn it all by hand. And I'm going to go another 1/4 turn. All right. So now that is, and let's see what the measurement looks like now. So 84 to 78. It's, oh geez, even worse. All right, I got to figure this out. I'm not sure why. I've cleaned the rotor off. I've rubbed it down with some steel wool just in case there was rust on it. This should be my high setting. I got 2 marks of 0 on here, so in between there should be the high setting, and that's 84. And then in between the 5s here, I've got marked a 5 or -5. There's 2 -5s there. That was my original measurement. So right in between, that should be the low setting. So I've got some variation on this. Maybe that's where my wobble's coming from. Okay, well, I've got a little bit of thinking